What's up, guys? Today AMD launches its first GPU based on the new Polaris architecture. Aimed at mainstream gamers throughout the PC kingdom, the RX 480 promises smooth gaming and fluid VR experiences for significantly less coin than the current market offerings. MSRP of the reference 8GB model comes in at $239, while the 4GB reference card sits at just $199 US. That's equivalent to just 180 euros, or as of last week, 500,000 British pounds. While AMD in recent years has sometimes been regarded as the economical choice in lieu of performance compared to its competitors, over the last few weeks a number of leaked benchmarks and Nvidia's price drop on all their 900 series GPUs clued us in that Team Red could be bringing more to the table than just attractive MSRPs with its new card. Sporting the new 14nm FinFET process and 4th gen GCN architecture, the RX 480 features the latest support for DirectX 12 and Vulkan, AMD FreeSync, HDR, and the ability to stream and record gameplay up to 4K with H.265 at 60 FPS. On the chip we get 36 compute units, 2304 stream processors, a base and boost clock of 1120 and 1266 MHz respectively, and either 4 or 8 gigs of GDDR5 on a 256-bit bus. The die shrink comes with improved power efficiency over the last generation as well, with a TDP of 150 watts. Taking a closer look at AMD's new reference cooler, we see it features an enclosed plastic shroud with a single 75mm blower-style fan that ejects air out the back. It also has a single 6-pin power connector facing the front side of the card. On the top, we find that the cooler actually extends beyond the relatively short PCB, making the total card length 9.5 inches or 241 millimeters. You won't find a sexy backplate here, unfortunately, but the cooler does look very nice with its textured surface and straightforward design. On the back, you'll find no signs of DVI, just 3 DisplayPort 1.4 and a single HDMI. On the software side of things, AMD also introduces their new tweaking utility called HITMAN, which makes me think all overclocking tools should be given fun superhero names. This program effectively replaces AMD Overdrive in the global Radeon settings and is skinned with a sleek modern UI with a nice assortment of adjustable parameters. When overclocking the RX 480 in HITMAN, I maxed out the power limit to 50% and managed to increase the core clock speed by just 4.5% before reaching instability, taking the maximum boost clock to 1325 MHz. The RX 480 may not be the overclocking champ we always hope a new video card will be, but there's a fair chance we'll be able to squeeze more juice out with aftermarket cards sporting more than just a reference 6-pin power plug. Memory clock speed was more forgiving, going as far as the slider could take it to 2250 MHz. All of this was done without touching the voltage, and as of now, voltage values in HITMAN can only be assigned for each DPM state manually, though AMD is looking into adding a voltage offset slider later on. For fan control, you can assign a minimum RPM so your fan never spins below the assigned value, and target, which is the fastest the fan will run at if the card is not above its temp target. You can also set a minimum acoustic limit in megahertz that dictates the threshold at which acoustics can be violated. User options for temperature control include a max value where the GPU will throttle down the clock speed if it hits that assigned temperature, and target indicates how hot the GPU can get before ramping up the fan. For all my overclock testing, I set my max to 83 degrees Celsius and my target to 80. With these parameters, I did encounter some thermal throttling on the overclocked RX 480, with the max GPU temp hitting a toasty 85 degrees Celsius and the core clock speed averaging 1292 MHz compared to our max clock speed of, again, 1325. It's not an alarming loss, but it is significant enough to mention, so I'm looking forward to seeing this effect minimized with the arrival of custom coolers. Fortunately, the reference card does a nice job in the acoustics department. It stays comfortably quiet at low to mid RPMs, and even at the 60% fan speed I tested at, the fan outputs a fairly calm humming noise that's pretty non-intrusive and quite impressive for a reference design. Before we take to the benchmarks, here's a look at the total system power draw featuring the cards I tested. At reference speeds, the RX 480 sips just about as much power as the EVGA Superclock GTX 970, and when overclocked consumes more than all of our Nvidia cards, but is still well below the Nitro R9 390, which, as we're about to see, yields an impressive performance per watt. With the exception of the RX 480, all the cards in today's tests are factory overclocked models and have not been manually tweaked by me in any way. However, if you've been following the news lately, you may have heard that MSI's GTX 1070 was being shipped to reviewers with a pre-tweaked firmware that set the card to an aggressive OC profile. So I've gone ahead and switched that to the gaming profile, which more accurately reflects the clock speeds retail consumers can expect out of the box. Only our RX 480 will be showing both reference and manually overclocked speeds today. Our testbed features a Gigabyte Gaming G1 Wi-Fi with a 5820K overclocked to 4400 MHz and 16 gigs of DDR4. All games tested were run in Windows 10 at 1920 by 1080 and 2560 by 1440 using the latest drivers from NVIDIA and the pre-release press driver straight from AMD. Without further ado, here are the benchmarks. Alright, so those are the results. Well, most of them. Since the GPU does feature async shaders, I did run a quick test for DirectX 12 performance in Ashes of the Singularity and found a 20% increase over DirectX 11 in average frame rates at 1080 and rather marginal games at higher resolutions. Overall, it looks like there's still a bit of room for improvement on the async compute front. Throughout our testing, the card's max VRAM usage hit around 5 gigs, which certainly advocates having more than a 4 gig frame buffer these days, even at sub 4K resolutions. Now, to make sense of today's numbers, I've calculated the overall gaming performance of each card by averaging the average frame rates across all games. Not confusing at all. The end result shows that our overclocked RX 480 8GB model fared just 0.6% slower than the superclocked GTX 970, 3.8% slower than the Nitro R9 390, and a whopping 59% faster than the MSI GTX 960. In Hitman, we saw the RX 480 best the GTX 970 and R9 390 at both resolutions, and in CRYSIS 3 it beats out the GTX 970 at 1920 by 1080. This is kind of exciting when you consider that the RX 480 is using its first pre-release driver versus the highly mature drivers of its competitors. While it would have been awesome to see the RX 480 beat out the GTX 970 more consistently here, where the Polaris chip takes a slight loss in raw performance, it makes up in terms of value. With the RX 480 8GB priced at $239, it nearly delivers 2 frames per dollar, edging out the 1.5 FPD of the superclocked GTX 970 and scoring well above the other cards. Even if we're to use NVIDIA's new price drop with the toss-in rebate of $259, the GTX 970 would still only yield 1.8 frames per dollar, and that's presumably for a non-factory overclocked model that would score lower than our superclock edition today. So if we're following the numbers here, the RX 480, at least the 8GB model I've tested, packs in quite an amazing value for performance that trails closely behind and occasionally outperforms the notably more expensive GTX 970 and R9 390. It's not the greatest overclocker and it does suffer from some moderate throttling, but hopefully the custom board partners can deliver the cooling and power delivery needed to turn things around. If you simply can't wait for the aftermarket models, AMD's new reference cooler veers on the warm side without the proper tuning, but offers an acoustic profile less atrocious than what we've seen in the past. But that is going to do it for now, guys, so let me know what you all think of this new card in the comments, and don't forget to toss me a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Before you go, feel free to pick up an Awesome Sauce shirt in my store. They're sure to turn some heads, especially if you're not wearing pants. As always, I'm Kyle with Awesome Sauce Network. Thank you all for watching. Subscribe to the channel for more tech stuff coming at you really soon, and I will see you all in the next video.